inspiration. A foundation still important today, the process of sharing words strung together that help point out the way, the many voices within each page. Turn pages from the past that resonate with you today. Turn pages today that create an escape within your mind. Turn pages that express a treasure within your tomorrow. Turn pages that hold a future for you to follow. We are turning pages.
I'm Whitney Mestelle. I've lived in Idaho for about 2.5 years. Currently, I'm the executive director and co-founder of Inclusive Idaho. We are a new nonprofit focused on inclusion for underrepresented and minoritized Idahoans. And our team is centrally located in Boise, Idaho. How did I get to where I am now? A really roundabout way, very unpredictable, I would say. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a family, I had 7 siblings growing up, and we were all adopted. And I'm a twin, and I also have an older biological sister. But my upbringing was very untraditional, very different, and something that made life really challenging, but also is been a huge part of who I am and forming me into who I am, is the fact that my family integrated the community that we grew up in. And so although I grew up in a really large family with several different family units, biological family units, we were the only Black family to live in the community that I grew up in, and the only Black family that had ever lived there. And so if you can imagine, in the late 80s, integrating a local, pretty rural community in middle Missouri was brought with it many, many challenges. And so that's how I started life. Just me and a bunch of siblings, and a single mother who was older when I was adopted, and always was more to me, felt more like a grandmother, and was old enough to really be my great-grandmother in some respects. And so that's sort of the beginning of my story that I can remember. But growing up in that environment with so many siblings in a community where no one looked like us was hyper challenging at times, but it also gave us an opportunity to prove to people is probably the wrong word, but there's so many folks in the community that we grew up in that would tell you now their major apprehension really moved on when they were able to get to know us and see us for who we were, and not what the media said or what TV, because that's all they knew. But and one of the reasons why the book that resonated with me today, one of the reasons why it resonated with me, is because I was raised by an older woman, and one of the things that we spent so much time doing growing up was going to church. And so the woman who raised me was a pastor. I mean, in the community that we lived in, it was something that really helped her cement some respectability in a place where no one looked like us, and there was a lot of apprehension about us being there. And so much of our lives were spent in church, from choir practice to just sitting in church to everything was built around, especially when I was younger, around church. And I remember so often being a kid and just being so bored and so over it, and not wanting to go to choir practice, and not wanting to dress up, and not wanting to do any of that stuff. But it's an integral part of who I am. It's so much of who I am, whether you think about my faith or the fact that I love to sing, or even that you could say that I'm good at singing. It's because it's what I did. And it was one of the things that broke up some of the challenges of growing up the way that I did. And so for the positives of my youth, there were many, 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 many rough moments. And church to me, and helping people and seeing the good. And there's another part in the book that I'll read about just seeing the beauty even in crumbling situations or in environments that from the outside seem really tough. And that was sort of how I lived growing up, for sure. And so that was the family and the household that I was a part of for about a little over a decade. And a really unique part about my story is that I've been adopted twice, which is not something you hear that often. But again, the book resonated with me because church was such a big part of who I was. But so much of my life was about looking at rainbows and finding beautiful things, even in really, really tough moments. Even being pulled to and from families in the foster care system, and sort of living on the fray all the time, being in classrooms where I was the only person that looked like me, and experiencing racism on the daily, and really desiring to live and be in an environment where folks accepted me for who I was and where my skin color, where I wasn't so hyper aware, so acutely aware all of the time of what I looked like or who I was or what my family was. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about how I grew up. But in many ways, and I hear it often, which is sometimes good and sometimes it's frustrating, but in many ways I am an anomaly as far as like the world would consider a success. And one of the things that I always wanted to do growing up was to talk to people. It's what I always loved. I was in speech and original, I did original oratory and speech and debate, and I majored in communications and in college, and thought I might be a news anchor one day, which is kind of funny now to me because I'd probably never do it now. But the woman that raised me raised over 50 kids, and when I graduated college, I was the first person to graduate from college. And I'm gonna get emotional, I'm sorry. It's not lost on me, the significance of that. She was born in 1935, and every kid that she raised was Black. And there's a part of me that is really thankful to be where I am, or to sort of broke the mold or break the cycle. But there's also a part of me that's often very sad, because I wonder why so many of the folks who came before me weren't able to, or what were the missed opportunities or the gaps. And not everybody has to go to college. Not everybody has to sort of achieve what the world says is success, which we know often is a 4-year degree or higher. But I also know that so many of those folks wanted to. And there was something coupled with the many challenges that it is to navigate this world as a Black or brown person that prevented that from happening. And I think that's part of why I chose this book, is because somehow, some way, in the midst of endless, felt like endless challenge, I continued to be able to see beauty and the rainbow, for lack of a better word, in the midst of crumblingness that allowed me to move past tragedy again and again and again, and push into going to a university and becoming a college athlete and becoming an All-American and graduating, and building a life and a career. And even the small things that I do on the weekend, or just hiking with my husband, or going snowboarding, are things that I never, ever would have dreamed of being able to do when I was a kid, ever. But I think that ability to just, and growing up with siblings who, even though we were frustrated, and growing up and being raised by someone who, even in her own difficulty and her own sadness, was able to show us the positive, and elevate education, and elevated care for other folks in a way that allowed me to hold on to like really small morsels of that, and be who I am today. So the book that I chose today is called The Last Stop on Market Street by Matt De La Pena. And I am going to read from a page that really spoke to me. And it says this: CJ looked around as he stepped off the bus. Crumbling sidewalks and broken down doors, graffiti tagged windows and boarded up stores. He reached for Nana's hand. How come it's always so dirty over here? She smiled and pointed to the sky. Sometimes when you're surrounded by dirt, CJ, you're a better witness for what's beautiful. So this specific passage spoke to me because when I think about my upbringing and what got me here today, there's so many broken pieces, and so many of my siblings and I come from broken families, and there's so much tragedy, but the relationships we were able to build with each other, and even though it was a struggle and somewhat fractured, the family that we were able to create in the moment came out of all of that fracture. And I think it would have been so easy for us to focus. And even now, I often have conversations with my twin about how easy it would be for us to constantly live in that negative space and not move past some of the trauma or the things that really affected us. But I would want kids to know, I would want foster kids to know, I want kids that are from single parent households or being raised by someone who's not their parents, or kids who their best bet, their best shot at a parent or parental figure is a mentor. Those are the beautiful things. Those are the rainbow moments. Those are the things that even in your circumstance that feels really difficult and really hard, and is really difficult and really hard, that continuing to look for those things and embrace the folks who are there for you, even if it's not the folks you want. The teachers who are there for you, and the friends who are there for you, and maybe it's your friends' parents. Those are the really beautiful things. And there's so many kids who come from broken situations, or way less than adequate situations, but there's so many folks in community, whether they're mentors or educators, or even folks in your local church that are really committed to bringing that beautiful, especially for young people. And that's why that spoke to me so much, because I think that's just sort of been my mantra, my push forward in life, is that your story doesn't define you. And even when you come from a lot of times what can seem like insurmountable circumstances, there's always something there. There's always, and for me, there always has been. There's always been a teacher. In elementary school, there was a teacher. And in middle school, there was a teacher. And my speech and debate coach in high school is a woman that I still call a couple times a year, and we talk on the phone for a couple hours, because she did that much to impact my life when it felt like I didn't have anybody, and there was a little bit of a very small support system. And my college track and field coach was the next person who's had a massive impact, and they were all women, every single one of them. And so I think even when you hear a story like mine, where parents and family is so fractured and so pieced together, there's always beauty to be had. And you can almost always look and see someone somewhere that really, really cares and wants to help you see the rainbow. My name is Whitney Mestelle, and this is my story.
We stem from simple memorization, memories of the epic odysseys that allowed the blind to see and freely roam, aspirations of a hero's return home, pictures painted, whether full of truth or slightly fabricated, haunted by mystery and a dream, the scheme to reveal a message, a moral learned, a choral serene, large enough to leave a mark on the hearts of those who open their ears to hear the underlying theme, inspiration. A foundation still important today. The process of sharing words strung together that help point out the way. The many voices within each page. The relationship between character and reader. Storyteller, narrator, business owner to a teacher. Musician, filmmaker, politicians, and a variety of leaders. Breeding braids and waves that weave tells, webbed together to connect a community. Pages, one by one, are turning in unity. Over years, from parchment and scroll to a bind, we find new enlightenment from the old. A gift from a mere book, soup that warms the soul, or an impact on a mind that seeks purpose, a ripple from a pebble that dives under the surface. From off the shelf, we carry a compass, the blueprint of navigation to our circumference. With wisdom at the steering wheel, we will always feel accomplished. Peel back the cover, discover the scent of borrowed time. Turn pages from the past that resonate with you today. Turn pages today that create an escape within your mind. Turn pages that express a treasure within your tomorrow. Turn pages that hold a future for you to follow. We are turning pages.